Hi, everyone. Kelly Deutsch here, and welcome to our first ever episode of Spiritual Wanderlust. I'm really excited to have you here with us. If you haven't heard of our new endeavor here on both Contemplative Monk and in the Spiritual Wanderlust community, we are starting this series to explore your inner life, the interior world, everything that has to do with the contemplative life and mysticism and psychology and embodiment and neuroscience, asking big questions and looking at all those mysterious things that lie beyond black and white answers. So we're excited to have you here. There's a lot of fun and mischief to be had in these interior spaces. And we've recognized how hungry we all are for meaningful conversations and to have ways to navigate all of this liminality that we've been living in lately. I mean, I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not have experienced some level of that liminality in these last 2 years with all the craziness socially, politically, medically going on all around us. And we want to be able to learn from ancient wisdom, from that perennial tradition that seems to be in our bones as humans, something that's in our human nature, the questions that we ask, the wisdom that's passed down through the ages. And I love bringing in, all the fun science and just current things and themes as well to help us navigate all of the craziness and wonder that this world and this life is. So I'm excited. Today I have joining me my friend Amy Piatt. And Amy and I have been collaborating for about 1.5 years. And I'm excited to just explore some ideas together. We've been talking lately about what it means to be whole, especially integrating the feminine with the masculine, because there's a lot of unfortunately toxic masculinity around out there. And when we are able to combine, the good in the masculine energy with the good in the feminine, it can be such a beautiful thing, especially for people in leadership, because people in leadership are held on such a pedestal. And when they're in the spotlight like they are, when they fall and when they don't know how to be whole, man, that can just be so difficult for all the rest of us to watch that. So Amy, I know you had a story that you were going to share about that.
And I was telling Kelly earlier that I recently had an experience of finding out that someone who I just adore, their work, their mind, I've read a lot of stuff by them and learned so much from them. And I still will continue to do that. But I found out that they have recently had, shall we say, some very human struggles with addiction and even like run-ins with the law. And you would think that, like, I don't know, at some point, I would learn not to put people up on a pedestal and expect them to be anything other than human. But I still make the mistake, even though I myself as a pastor really try to resist that tendency to be raised up, to be anything other than just me, Amy, flaws and all. Sometimes we need to lift people up, but then we're heartbroken or we're disheartened when they fall. And so, like, the need for that, first of all, what is that? And then how can we maybe not set people up and set ourselves up for that? Thinking about, like, Rene Girard, and he talks about the scapegoat and a need to have someone to blame and sort of like cast all of our, I hate the word sin, but that's sort of the culture from which it comes. Our shortcomings, our shadow on, and then we run it off a cliff and we can wash our hands off of it, right? Well, is this sort of like the bookend to that? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so I was just having this conversation the other day with a friend of mine. I'll call him Bill. And Bill and I studied in Rome together, and he was a seminarian at the time. I was in the convent, and he came back, was ordained a priest and had been a priest for a handful of years. And he himself was struggling with addiction. And so he talked to his bishop and said, like, I'd like to take some time in a treatment center, to like, I need to figure this out. And the bishop was very gracious about it. But after his time at the treatment center, he's like, I still need some time. I'm going to take another year sabbatical to figure out what's going on. And the bishop was like, all right, well, then you need to figure out a way to provide for yourself. And, we can see where this goes. And so for the first time ever, Bill had to figure out how to get a job, interview, rent an apartment, find furniture. Like, he had never done that. It was like high school, minor seminary, major seminary, priest, like, surprise. But the thing that, one of the things that was really difficult for him, among others, was really just others' expectations and disappointments, particularly his family. And I have another priest friend who left the priesthood, and he's like, Kelly, like, you would have thunk that I had just announced the worst thing ever. I was raised in an Irish Catholic family. They were so proud to have a priest in their family. And so, for me to leave, he's like, it honestly would have been easier for me to tell my like staunch Catholic parents that I was gay. He's like, I'm not, but that would have been an easier announcement for them than, I'm leaving the priesthood. And as I was talking with my friend Bill, it was so interesting, because I think, just like you were saying there with that idea of the scapegoat, this is very Jungian, like how we just cast not only our shadows on people, but we also cast our light, or some people call it the positive shadow. And so we want our heroes, our gurus, these models that we hold up for ourselves, to hold all the positive things about us, the things that we don't really think we're capable of. And so we have to cast them on someone else. So when they fall, they get so upset, because they're like, you were supposed to hold the dream alive for me. Like, that was your responsibility. Instead of recognizing like, oh, maybe I can be prayerful and care about every person that comes in contact with me, and all the things that we think pastors or spiritual teachers or whoever are. And instead we put this huge burden on these very human persons. And I mean, I'm sure it's true in Protestant churches as well, but man, within the Catholic Church, like priests and nuns, other Catholics are just like, oh, father, oh, sister. And they just have such reverence for them, which, hey, that's lovely, but also forget how human they can be as well. There's another friend of mine who, I have lots of friends who became priests or nuns, and within that percentage that also left. So I have another friend who was in a convent, left, had a really difficult experience, not great. There's some toxicity there, and that's, oh my gosh, we could do a whole nother podcast on that, how we spiritualize our emotional toxicity. Like, oh, in Catholic world, we just say, offer it up, like, this is your sacrifice, offer it up to Jesus. It's like, yeah, no, not toxic behavior. That's not what you do with that. But she was sharing with me how she had been, circles that I run in, she had dinner the other night with an exorcist.
As one does.
Right. And he was saying some of the most insidious things that he had ever seen in his work as an exorcist were in convents with nuns. And he's like, so many people have such a hard time believing that, because they can see like, oh, okay, those priests and all those sex scandals and the shockingness of that, but he's like, people don't want to believe that women are capable of that too.
Oh yeah. Oh, they are. We are. Anybody who has this flesh suit is capable of it.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting listening to you talk. I'm just thinking about like the ways in which, first of all, I resent when people do this to me, but then I do it to others. Like I've sort of developed a habit in my adult life of saying, yes, I am a pastor, because inevitably it comes up when you meet someone, like, what do you do? And for a while, like when I lived in Portland, I was so worried about how it would be received. I would say, oh, I work in nonprofit, and just let it fly, don't press this. But I've kind of gotten past that. And I say, I'm a minister, but probably not what you think of when you think of a minister. I also yell at my kids. I cuss. I screw up a lot, and I'm kind of an asshole. I really do. I say that. I read the room. Like, if it's not going to land well, usually I'm pretty good on first meetings, whether or not that would just be something that would like be a game changer for them or not. Sometimes maybe I should say it anyway, but it's my way of saying, like, don't do this to me, and if you can relate to this and even find humor in it, you and I are probably going to get along. And then we don't have to have this weird distance and this weird, like, fake getting along thing we do for a long time before we let down our guard and actually get to the meat of human relationship, if ever at all, And I won't let you down, at least in the same way. I will probably hurt you at some point or offend you, because that's what we do, but I don't want to, I don't mean to. But maybe it won't be like, crucify her, she's dead to me. We don't need to do that either. We don't need to run someone off a cliff. We go to these extremes. I don't know. There's like the Madonna horror complex. It's like I don't know what like the relationship version of that would be. Like, just the Christ scapegoat complex, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you shared that, what stuck out to me was the distance that happens when people do that. Instead of us being peers and fellow humans, that we're all just trying to figure this out together. Like, nobody has all of life's answers figured out. No guru, no priest, no theologian, philosopher, whoever, no saint. But to place all of our ideals in one person, or at least a handful of people, does put such a distance between us that we can no longer be peers and fellow humans. And that's really sad. I mean, both for me, if I'm the one projecting it, and also for you, because all of a sudden you lose that ability to be I was gonna say, lose the ability to be human. It's not like you absolutely lose it, but at least in my eyes.
Yep. Well, yeah. And so there's less risk there, right? Like, you can't hurt me. You can only have this much access to me, but then there's also no richness in our relationship. So it's like the degree to which we're willing to be exposed and just open ourselves up, imperfections and all, is also like the room we have. Our dance floor gets a lot bigger, right? And it's not always going to be a beautiful dance. Sometimes I'm going to trip and accidentally step on your toes, and sometimes I'm just going to want to like do, like, I don't know, what's the one where you go under the stick? Limbo.
Oh yeah.
Like, silliness. I just want to be silly. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't all have to be ballroom or ballet, but like, sometimes it's really worth it. It's really worth it to just stay open. And I think when I talk about people being hungry, this is where like the conversation usually turns. Yeah, Amy, but how do you do that? It's all well and good to talk about it, but how do you actually stay open? What does that look like? And so I just want to say, like, for those of you listening, this is what we want to explore. If anything, today we just want to give you sort of a general overview of some of the things that we'll continue to dive into in these conversations, and the things that we're still learning. We have not perfected. We're not experts. I don't think I ever will be. But through sitting with my pain, storytelling, and having people in my life who are willing to witness those things and like reflect love back to me, it's actually rather uncomplicated. I'm not going to say it's easy. It is not. But it's so worth it, and it's quite simple.
Yeah, and there's something so rich in learning from each other and recognizing that we are all beginners, and in some sense we are all wisdom teachers. We all have life experience that we've learned from. And from my years in the corporate world, when I do leadership development and training and things, I first of all, sometimes, I'd go to like seminars and continuing education things. And I kind of was anywhere from annoyed to resentful when I went to a seminar and the presenter spoke as if they knew everything, like they had the answer to every question, instead of, recognizing that there are very capable professionals in the room who probably have lots of experience, instead of just saying like, well, what do you all think? And learning how powerful that can be. If I was leading a training and somebody's like, okay, so how do you deal with like this kind of difficult person in the workplace? And then opening it up and saying, what experience do you guys have? And just validating that we all have valid experience and riches, treasures, wisdom to share. And it really evens out the playing field so that we become, instead of gurus, we become more facilitators,
Yes. Yes. And I think when I talk about maybe a more feminine model of leadership, I think collaboration is something that just comes more naturally to us. Not always. It's not, absolute and always true, but these stereotypes exist for a reason. Women know how to work together to get a thing done. We know how to communicate. We know how to encourage each other to use those gifts, to see those gifts and bring them out. We don't need someone to be at the top. We don't need someone to win. Leadership does not have to be a pinnacle from which you're destined to fall. It's just the main example we have.
Yeah, especially that model of leadership. Yeah, because it certainly is helpful to have somebody where it's like, okay, there's some structure here and this is how we're going to make decisions, etc. But there is something very masculine about that executive, like, I'm going to make an executive decision and this is what we're going to do. And sometimes that's necessary. It's not like feminine good, masculine bad. It's simply that we need to make sure that both of those gifts are interwoven in how we approach the world, and not only in leadership, but in our daily lives. What's that? And when we talk about masculine energy, feminine energy, it's more in that archetypal way. It's not like I need to somehow channel something. I mean, use whatever language you're comfortable with, but that's one of the reasons why I like Carl Jung and his, ideas of archetypes and things, and the shadow work. We're going to have somebody come on here and talk about shadow work. That stuff is fascinating. Yeah. But to be able to integrate those, the light and the shadow of the feminine, of the masculine, all of those gifts, so that we can be more balanced human beings.
Right. And maybe less inclined to hide and feel ashamed about them, but just to learn how to reconcile them, to kind of hold them lightly up next to things that we are good at, things that can be celebrated, and actually maybe things that we thought before were shameful and weak can become, with time, gifts that can inform us, that can help other people heal, that actually, with a little tweaking, are beautiful. I mean, that's the story of 12-step wisdom, right? In that addiction tells you to be ashamed and to hide it and to just keep being addicted, right? That's the only way out. It's the only way through this. And that's how it thrives. But the way 12-step works is that you come together, and in this shared wisdom, this shared story, you hear something of yourself in my weakness, in my struggle, and somehow you feel less alone. You feel more welcomed, more seen, and you find hope. There's like this miracle that takes place in those rooms where people are just being really honest about the ways they have totally messed up their lives. And it's counterintuitive, but it's real.
Yeah, so much. I mean, that reminds me of all of Brene Brown's work on vulnerability. The person who is being vulnerable almost always feels like they are just revealing all of their weaknesses. Like, look how weak I am. Whereas everyone else in the room is like, oh shit, that person is so strong to be able to share that, like, what courage.
Yes. Isn't that funny? all in the perception. Yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah.
It does take courage. It does take courage to be seen, but it's also such a gift. And yeah, to have that received in a way that is loving and reflected back to you. Oh my gosh. I mean, I want that for everyone.
Yeah. Who would you say, if I asked you, who are one or two people that you have met, whether you know them personally or, by name, um, who seem to embody both that masculine and feminine really well?
Oh, that's a great question. Hmm. So the first person that comes to mind is probably uh, my own mom.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, my mother has never been much of a stereotype in the way of like traditional female roles. She's a little like 5'3". Now she's great. I mean, that's where I get it. She used to be blonde when I was a kid, blonde lady who was just like very, not overly confident, but just pretty strong in who she was. Oldest of 5 kids, and like she kind of ran the show. And so she didn't doubt herself much. And if she did, she didn't show it.
Hmm.
Like put a pin in that, because the whole like imposter syndrome thing is part of the whole narrative I think that we have to work
Mm.
around. But um I still see her as somebody who just has a natural sense of like assuredness in who she is. And it's not about her ego and like puffing herself up. It's just like, I'm comfortable in my own skin.
Mm.
And growing up, I watched her like change her own tires and mow her own lawn. And she was a single mom. Um, little background, you know this about me, Kelly, but people listening won't. And I share this with my father's permission. He got into recovery from alcoholism when I was 13. So that was why they split. When I was 4, his drinking just started like tail spinning. That's a whole other show. But my mom had to figure this stuff out for herself. And um, she, in the workplace, she worked with all men, but she was their boss and she was smaller than any of them. But also like incredibly maternal in the ways that like she was very affectionate and loving to my brother and I. And like taught me how to cook, and she would sing to me and play guitar. And yeah, she's a storyteller. Um, so she's a good balance of, when I think about like male and female qualities, my own mother,
Hmm.
for me is like pretty key in that area. How about
Mhm.
you?
Yeah. Let me sit with that moment. Ironically, the two people that are coming to mind are both priests, which is funny because I think you'll find many, many celibates, priests or religious, who are not very full bodied. But these two that I'm thinking of, one was my spiritual director as my life was falling apart. And yeah, Father Mark had like a really great way of, um, he had his masculine presence, where he just felt like full statured human being, but also had a profound gentleness, and that sense of receptivity that um, was exactly what I needed, as I was falling apart. And um, I really think came through his own personal crisis and how he learned. And I think that's how a lot of this works. That's, crisis serves as our own kind of haphazard initiation, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look into, I think Rohr talks about that some. It's like, if you don't have some sort of official initiation, where it's like, okay, you go through this official crisis of some sort, you have to do this really hard thing and you're going to be
Rites of
tried.
passage. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you don't have something official, you're gonna like, life is gonna give you something unofficial, that's gonna wake you up to how crazy reality is. But But once you've been through some sort of crisis, and not everyone, it's not like every crisis leads to a wise person. I honestly don't know what makes the difference, why one suffering will lead somebody else, one person to become bitter, and why another suffering will lead another person to become a saint. I don't know. That's a mystery to me. But there is something really profound about those who find a deeper wisdom and a deeper sense of grounding are then often, I don't know, almost initiated to be able to help others, who are going through that and have a different way of seeing it, instead of maybe the more traditionally masculine, like, oh, I got to fix you, I got to help you, which I'm sure both of us have gone through. At least I know I did with illness, like people who just want to fix and solve, which it's like, I appreciate that you would like to help me, but what makes you so uncomfortable with this?
Yeah. Yes. That is such a huge challenge for, anybody in a helping profession. Like, we're supposed to want to help, right? We're supposed to be able to fix. We're supposed to know what to do. And I would sort of put that in the camp of a feminine characteristic, because it's part of nurturing. And I don't want to fall too much. I realized when I was describing my mother, like, those were pretty stereotypical male female definitions, but growing up, that was my first formative experience. But like, just bearing with someone, witnessing their life, and allowing our hearts to be broken by the things that break their hearts.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the best we can do. And that's not nothing. It's huge.
Yeah. So let me backtrack. How would you define what you would consider like these masculine and feminine archetypes? What words do you associate with each?
Yeah. Okay. So feminine would be receptivity, subtlety, softness, life bearing, right? Life comes through the feminine. And masculine would be, I immediately went to the negative, and I didn't want to do that. I don't usually think of it in those terms, but for some reason today, that's where I went. Masculine would be provisional. It would be courageous. It would be, what's the word? Like, when you want to start things.
Oh, initiative.
Thank you. That's my daughter on the fridge, leaving the door open. Sorry. Yes, they initiate. So life starting, which is actually, if you think of the woman's body as that which bears life, you need a man's body, the mechanics of it, right, to help give life, to initiate it. Yeah. I don't know. Great question. I hadn't thought it through ahead of time, but that's what comes to mind. How about you?
Yeah. As you were sharing that, I haven't thought this through entirely, but it aligns for me perhaps with the difference between head and heart. Again, speaking in these archetypal ways, not just, in no way am I saying like, oh, all women are receptive and vulnerable and life-giving, and all men are provisional. Like, that says very little to do with like everyday human beings on the street. But there is something to those images and stories that we give over millennia throughout human history. So thinking of that heart space as much more present and supple, and the word expansive comes to mind, but that can also be a very masculine thing as well. Head does have more of that analytical, problem solving, taking the initiative. which is why it's so important for us to have both, because we have to live with both head and heart, or you could even call that left and right brain. Left brain tends to be the much more analytical, straightforward, let me be efficient. Right brain is the relational, okay with mystery, creative kind of energy. And you have to use both sides of your brain on all occasions.
Yes.
Like, we can't just use half of it. Yeah, and I love both of those. Like, I love the way that both of those kinds of energies, if you will, feel in my body. When I'm just in flow and I'm creating, but I'm also achieving, and I'm just like, yeah, I want to go conquer the world, and you just have that kind of expansive energy that makes you light up. But I find, especially in spiritual direction or coaching or any of those scenarios where you need to listen deeply, that's a much more feminine stance, of just receiving people into that hollowed out interior, and oftentimes it's suffering that hollows us out. But because of that, we have a much more spacious place to receive others and be present with them in pain, struggle, joy, life.
Yeah, life. Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking, like, the people who I lean on for spiritual direction, guidance, wisdom are people who seem pretty integrated in these two.
Yep.
I don't know, human experiences, that they have learned to hold them, not in tension so much, but like lightly, and to pull from both, and to allow both expressions, and not to suppress. That was another word that I was thinking when you were talking about how some people are surprised by nuns having the same issues that everyone else has. Well, I think it's no surprise that any situation that would ask us to suppress a part of who we are would cause some people who aren't allowed to integrate in some form, right? If they're not given some expression of integration, that suppressed human experience is going to come out sideways.
Yes.
In the form of pain, and it is going to hurt others, because hurt people, right? And cause more suffering. And so we need tools to integrate. We need examples of integration. We need a path for it. And so, like, the wise people, another example I would give is my spiritual direction, Don. It's funny because his name could be D-O-N, which it is, or D-A-W-N, but like the morning. Don, 78-year-old man who is the most integrated man in the way of like totally embracing his feminine side. It's hard to articulate, but he has like a mother's heart. He will cry with me. He is so intuitive. There's a good word. I've had so many times when Don has called or texted me and he just knows that I need to hear from him. And he'll say, I'm praying for you. Call when you have time. Or, hey, you came up in my prayers today, so I'm calling you. What's going on? And it's like, how did you know?
Yeah.
So he's very receptive. He's very open. Yeah. That would be another good example in my adult life. Yeah,
that's beautiful. And it is, like you said, I think we need to have these opportunities as well as models for integration. And that was always such a huge question that I had while I was in the convent. I was in formation with these sisters, and I remember asking, even before I entered the convent, asking these other sisters, since that's, what I plan to do with my life, and asking so many religious, like, what do you do with your sexuality? Like, how do you live that? Like, what do you, and so many, really because of the formation that they'd been given, would just be like, oh, well, you just, kind of sublimate your desires and offer it up to God. But like, when you press someone, I'm like, to ask them, like, well, what does that even mean? And they're like, well, just
no, I don't know.
You'll figure it out. I'm like, no, you can't just use theological terms like just sublimate your desires. Like, you have to tell me how to do that. You have to explain what this looks like and how, on a practical level. Like, that's one of the reasons why I was so thankful for my spiritual director, who was very like integrated both, you know, with the masculine and feminine, as well as with sexuality, you know, to have yeah, some insight into, like, he was Australian. He's like, Kelly, what do you do on an evening when you know you just want to sleep with a man? You know, I was like, you tell me. Like, I don't know what to do with that.
I'm blushing. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So wonderful just to have very human conversations like that, because it's true, if you repress, it does come out the side, and it's not going to be in a healthy way almost ever. But it
kind of
really
comes
hard.
full circle. Yeah, I'm thinking about this piece that we started with about like a need to hold people up. Okay, so in 12 step, you find a sponsor. They really encourage that, and they say to look for someone who has something of what you want. They have what you want. Okay, so how is that different from holding someone above you, right? And making them like a guru or an expert? I think it's so much more honest to say, no, this person just is a little further down the road on this path. And they're probably still going to take some wrong turns. They're still going to trip up. But it gives like a whole new permission, a new vocabulary for that relationship. And it's so much more like grounded in reality.
Yes.
We're going to do this together.
I remember it was a very important turning point for me in spiritual direction with this priest, Father Mark. When it finally clicked in his humanity, because it is so easy, especially when you're starting to just grapple with these big questions and you feel kind of uncertain, you know, you just want someone who's like, okay, I can put wholehearted trust in you. You've been down this road, and just entrust myself to you. And it was a really important turning point when, I don't know, within a few months, there were a few things that just either his insight or advice or something just felt really off, you know, or he would say like, oh, well, you know, you might consider XYZ, and how does that sit with you? And I'm like, terribly. Like,
doesn't.
Like, no, that doesn't. I don't think you understood even what I'm saying. But to have those experiences was really important for my insights to be like, Kelly, he's human too. Like, he's a few more steps down the road, but he doesn't have all the answers. And that was important for me to recognize, because I didn't even realize I was doing that, projecting in my spiritual direction relationship. You know, it was just
it's so easy
trusting myself to him. And I think that's fine and good for some stages of our growth. I think that can be important when we're feeling like we're floundering and like, is there someone who understands this? Because sure, he had certainly more wisdom and knowledge and experience than I did. And I still love to find spiritual directors, coaches, and therapists who have that similar quality. Like, yes, I want a sponsor who's 2 steps ahead of me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is easy to place then our trust or project all of our ideals and hopes in that person.
I guess one of the other things I love about 12 step is that once you get to 12th step, you go back to number 1. Like, you're never done. Go back to saying, I'm powerless and my life is unmanageable. Be humble, make yourself low, like, not humiliated. That's very different. There's enough of that to go around as it is. Like, we got this covered. No, just make yourself low like the earth. Just take some time to watch the ants and like little flowers popping up. See how that informs you. Wash some feet for a while.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom there. What would you say if you had to pick 2 nuggets of wisdom that you've gained from 12 steps? What would you say stand out?
2. I think the one that I will hold to, and that probably is something I say to myself 10 times a day: feelings aren't facts. Because I am so prone to deep emotion. I'm a feeler. Oh yeah. For those of you familiar with the Enneagram, I'm a 7. I'm an enthusiastic feeler. They're not facts. It doesn't mean that they're not legitimate. It doesn't mean that they don't feel very real at the time. Real is not the same as factual. Feelings need to be felt. They can inform. They need to be acknowledged. They can pass through us, but they aren't facts. That was a huge step for my growth. And then, oh gosh, probably, I have so many slogans running through my head right now. Probably just progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
What is progress today? It looks different every day. Sometimes, I mean, for the alcoholic, it's, I didn't drink today. That's progress, because in my life before I did. I'm not an alcoholic, but I'm certainly an addict. I use that term pretty loosely to mean like anything I put between myself and love, anything that blocks me from love. So I can be addicted to TV, to chocolate, to shopping, to, I mean, you name it. Netflix, avoiding responsibility, procrastination. The list can go on. Can you tell? Like, I have a very long list. Yeah. Progress, not perfection. Perfection is, it's not a word I like.
That's another episode we'll have to have, is not only on the 12 steps, but also on detachment, or, you know, like each of those things that you named off as possible addictions also sound like what, you know, many spiritual writers would call attachments, you know, because it's like you have this kind of graspy feel, like, but I need, oh my gosh, and you have that anxiety to fill that kind of liminal space where you can't quite put your feet on the ground, and so things feel a little out of control, and so we have to grasp after other things that either make us feel better or give us some semblance of control.
Exactly. Yeah. It was like, they're actually connected, those two, because it's like, whatever this feeling is of like needing is not a fact. There goes my dog. That was Emmett. It's not a fact. It may feel really big and like it could just destroy me and overwhelm me, but it just needs to be felt. And if I can just sit with it instead of trying to fill it with whatever it is, you know, or escape. That's another thing 7s like to do. If I can just sit with it, oh, it's just this thing that needs to be loved. Acknowledged. It's really not so bad.
You've got my brain going on like all the many different directions we could shoot into. I'm like, I just need to start making a list for our future conversations. And for all of you listening too, if you have things that you're like, oh, tell me more about that, feel free to let us know in the comments.
Sounds great.
Wonderful.
I look forward to the conversation, the follow-up.
Indeed, I do as well. Thank you all for joining us here today. And Amy, thanks for sharing your thoughts and wisdom as we wander this wonderful world together.
Right on, let's dance. Thanks, Kelly.